All right, let's talk about Rev11 licensing. This will be, I'm aware there's some VMS people in the room, so apologies to you guys. You're going to be a little bit bored for the next little while. Although you're all probably using Synergy on Windows and Workbench and Visual Studio and all of that sort of stuff, so this does kind of affect how the licensing for those products works as well, of course. So Rev11 licensing is the new... The thing we've been talking about for about 5 years now and promising to deliver it, and ever since ever since there's been subscriptions, people have been saying, why do we have to reinstall these keys every year? And we're finally there. So with Synergy version 11, we are also introducing a separate thing, as I mentioned earlier, but this is not dedicated to version 11. You can do this on version 10 and version 9 as well, and I'll talk about that. But we're finally introducing Rev11 licensing. And I don't want you to misunderstand. We used to call it cloud licensing. We've kind of stopped doing that now because it was a little bit misleading. This is not licensing from the cloud. This is a new mechanism for distributing and installing product keys. And that's really all it is. Okay? It doesn't affect the way that your licensing works within your local area network on your systems in any way. It's simply a new mechanism for us getting keys to you and onto your machines. Okay? And therefore, as you can probably guess, it does require internet access to work properly from your licensed servers. And I'll talk about what it needs and how it works and how often it talks and what's going on in a few minutes' time. So essentially the way this works is your licensed server, the SYND process on your Unix, Linux or Windows systems is going to periodically communicate with a web service out on the internet, and it is going to keep in touch with that thing. Every now and again, it just pings it to make sure it can talk to it. And every time that ping happens, there's a little exchange goes backwards and forwards basically saying, have you got anything new for me? Okay. And if anything's changed on the server on our end, that information which is changed, altered keys, is downloaded to your system and installed into your licensed server for you. So it takes away, for example, the requirement for reapplying new Synergy product keys every year when you renew your subscription, for example. It takes away the need to download and install new product keys if you call customer service and say, I want to add a new developer, or I want to add a new 3 users, or I need to add SQL connection to this license. All of those sort of things, you will no longer receive product keys and have to go and install them. They will just flow onto your system. The communication is always from you to us, so we never call into your networks. Your licensed server calls out to our web service. So it's always outbound traffic, and it is standard HTTPS traffic on the standard port 443. So it's all encrypted, and the messages are pretty small in nature. Essentially, the way this thing works, as I mentioned, is there is a periodic polling frequency. So you contact us on a predetermined schedule. It's not very often. By default, most of the year, it's once a week. There's a little ping goes out to say, anything changed? No? Okay, I'm good. That's literally all it is. Again, just to re-emphasize, once the keys are installed in your licensed server, there's no change to the way that licensed server works. Your clients still talk to your local licensed server, and that's where they get their keys from. Your runtime systems are not talking to the cloud in order to get licenses to be able to run. So the big picture looks like this. Essentially, here's your licensed server, here's whatever local systems you've got. And again, this excludes the OpenVMS stuff. This is where we use the Synergy licensing, not the OpenVMS license packs. So this is the licensed server. These are any of your local Unix, Linux, Windows systems that are obtaining licenses from that server, and that process continues to operate as normal. The new bit is that your licensed server can contact our licensing service, which is a web service hosted in Microsoft Azure, and obtain information about product keys from it. Internally, our customer services people are using our internal systems, well, external systems based on our Salesforce code. That's our CRM. It's where all of our product information, licensing information, all of your key information is all in our Salesforce system. So as customer services might connect to and use that service and say, oh, customer XYZ just ordered a new system, or they want to add 5 new users or whatever, that's all happening within our Salesforce environment. You can also interact with the licensing stuff more and more through our licensing portal on the Resource Center. So if you have access to the resource center and you are a license administrator for your organization, you can already log in and look at all of your licenses and look at all of the keys associated with those licenses and how many users those keys are for and when they expire and all of that kind of stuff. That information's already online and available to you. And I'll talk to you about a couple of new things you can do with regard to that as well. So customer services interact with this stuff. You can interact with it through the licensing portal. The only new bit is the cloud web service and this purple line where you talk to the cloud service to get new keys. That's it. So these processes on the back end are the same. There is some new stuff you can do as a customer in our license portal, and there's going to be more as time goes by. But yes, it's literally just about how do the keys get to your system. Okay? The licensing web service, if you, by default, like I say, it's an outbound HTTPS message. Almost everywhere that just happens, but on a few occasions where outbound traffic is blocked completely, you might need to open a port on your firewall to enable this to happen. So if you do block outbound traffic, then https licensing.synergex.com is the place that we're hitting, and that's the URL that would need to be opened up. We'd recommend, if your firewall allows it, put your exception in there using the DNS name. This is the current IP address of the service. We will do everything we can to try and ensure that it never changes, but we can't guarantee that it will never change. If we're aware that it's going to change, of course, we'll do everything we can to get that information out to you guys well in advance. But if your system lets you, then establish the exception based on the DNS name of the licensing service. Again, this is really not that important, but just background information. This is how often we poll. So once you install a brand new system, which is obviously when things start, that system goes into a 14-day grace period, just like it always did. And your server will be polling the web service hourly at that point. So it's actively looking for new keys. You've just done a new install. Once an hour, it's going to ping, and hopefully, before too much longer, it's going to get its keys. Beyond that, once you install keys on the system, then essentially it drops down to an every 7 days. So as long as there are no product keys that are anywhere close to expiring, then we do a quick ping once every 7 days, and assuming it contacts, that's it, we're good to go. That's the extent of the activity. Once we start to get close to any key on your system expiring, because you've got a subscription license, for example, and you've got an end date on the subscription, is the typical case. Even with ALMs these days, ALM customers are going to see a new key that is called ALM, and it has an expiry date. It doesn't expire any products. It simply signifies what is the expiry date of your ALM contract. It's purely for information purposes. I'll talk to you a little bit more about that later. So once we get within 9 to 30 days, we start doing things daily. We're thinking, something's coming up, it should be happening, let's look once a day. If we get within 3 to 8 days, it starts to look every 4 hours. And then again, if we get within that critical 3-day period, then we're going to start to look hourly. As some of these nearer in events start happening, emails start happening as well. So our customer services start getting notifications, your license administrators start getting notifications. So it's not like this stuff's completely hidden in the background. If we start to get close and things have not been renewed, then there are notifications that are going to happen. What you do need to be aware of is what happens if sync fails. Okay, so if a system is polling, if we don't receive anything from your system within 30 days, then we will generate email notifications to both customer services at our end and your license admins saying there might be a problem, your license server's not checking in with us. Okay, it's purely informational at that point. And those notifications get repeated at 60 days and 90 days. By default. So there are some warnings if communication stops for any reason. Okay? If we still cannot communicate with you after 90 days, the system will go back into a 14-day what's called forced expiration. And the reason for that is that's going to start showing up the messages on the screen like you do with a new install to make it a little bit more visible. Something hasn't happened. There's been 3 warnings over 90 days and we've still got a problem. So we force it into an expiration at that point in time to make that more visible to the actual users of the system. As all of this is happening, messages are reported at all stages. So we do log things to the system log. So you can look in your syslog on Unix or your Windows event log on Windows and you can see any of these issues occurring. And if you've got Cindy logging enabled, then we log problems like this to the license manager log file as well. Also, you do have the option to change these periods. If you want to know about things happening, if you've got a communication problem and you want to know faster, then there are configuration options. I think right now you have to contact customer service, but they can switch you onto a 10, 20, 30 or 20, 40, 60-day window instead of the 30, 60, 90. So if you prefer to deal with this stuff and be a little bit more responsive. Right now, they're going to do it through customer service. If it becomes a popular thing for people to switch, they'll put an option in the web portal to let you change it. If you want to, for any reason, force a sync to happen right now, let's say your system's only, it's nothing close to anything expiring, but you want to add some users and you want to make it happen right now, then you can go to the command prompt at any time and do an LMU-sync, and that will just sync it right there and then. Okay. You can also do this if you're in Windows in the SynConfig utility where you can control licensing. There's also a synchronize button in SynConfig. And as you can see, there's information about when it last polled, when it's next going to poll, all of that kind of stuff. And this shows up both in the LMU output and in SynConfig as well. So you can see where it's at in the process and how often it's polling. I don't want to encourage you to use LMU-sync unless you really need to, because it pulls all of the information about all of the keys. If you do a manual sync, it downloads everything. Okay, so it's not a cheap, it's not that expensive, but it's not something we want to encourage. But if you know you're waiting for something and you want to force it to happen right now, that's the way. Rev11 licensing is supported on Windows, Unix, and Linux, so all of the platforms apart from OpenVMS. In Synergy 11, it is out of the box and you do not have a choice. It's going to be this way. In earlier versions, some people have beta tested this and said, I just want to use this now. We do have a licensing upgrade package. All it does is convert your license server to the new version, basically, and you can apply that upgrade package to any Synergy version from 9.3. So 9.3, 9.5, 10.1, and 10.3. If you want to turn on this stuff right now without having to upgrade Synergy, you can do so. The only difference is that the older Synergy runtimes cannot report connectivity issues to you, okay, because they don't have the code built in to do that. So you still get logging, you still get email notifications, but if you get within that 14-day forced expiration, you're not going to see the messages on the screen like you do when you put a new system there, because the runtime doesn't have that capability. But other than that, the email notifications and the logging still works. I want to just go through a few typical workflows so that you'll understand how the process might change and how the process might get a little bit easier. So here's the typical workflow for a new system install, just to show you how easy this makes things. And I did this myself. I put together a VM and installed the 11 beta, and I was blown away with how easy it was to get the licensing up and running. So the concept is that you as a customer order a new system through the same mechanism you did with customer services and so on. You still provide the details of the license that you want and what products you want, how many users. There's no requirement to provide the registration string, though, at this point. Obviously, you don't have it yet. You haven't necessarily installed the machine. So you're just describing a system. You're going to give it the licensee name and say, this is what we're going to call the system, but you don't need a registration string. Customer services then create the order in the system, and they will provide to you, I think generally through an email, you will get a 4-digit install code. So it's like ABC9 or something like that, whatever it is. It's just 4 digits. And essentially that 4 digits is all you need to activate the system and get the keys downloaded and installed. That's it. It's the end of the process. So you install the system, configure your license server just like you always did. That now you're in a 14-day grace period. And all you need to do is apply that 4-digit install code, which you can do either in SynConfig or with an LMU command, LMU-install and the 4 digits. And your license server will go out to the cloud, pass up the 4-digit code, download the keys, install them, and you're good to go. So the install process is significantly easier than it used to be. There's an example of the email you get from customer services when you place the order, and you'll see there's the install code. And that's literally all you need. You go to your system, type that code in, licenses come down, good to go. Okay. Just for background information, things do look a little bit different. This is what the LMU output looks like immediately having installed a new system. So it's similar to before. You get this 14 days remaining for other products and no licenses, but you'll see you're getting a little bit more information now. You'll see the registration strings are a slightly different format. They're a little bit longer. You don't need to deal with those registration strings anymore, by the way. We upload them automatically. All you provide for the new system is you specify the licensee name. This is what the system licensee will be called. We pass the reg strings when we do a sync now, so that makes things a lot easier. And you can see polling is turned on. This is when it last attempted. This is when it was last successful, and this is when it's going to try again for the next poll. Okay. On the client side, again, you see that extended registration string. In the SynConfig utility things, again, there's a few more options now. In the licensing page, you can see the new longer registration string. You can see the polling information in here as well, so you can keep track of when it's going to poll next. If you want to force it to poll or synchronize now, you can do so. There's also an advanced settings option now, which basically lets you control things like if you have an internet proxy that you need to talk through to get to the outside world, then you can configure the proxy information here, and the license server will use that proxy information. And you also have the ability to update the contact information. Actually, I think I'll talk about this a little bit later on. This is basically, you know, when you get that 14-day message when you've just installed a new machine, and it's got the Synergex contact information in there. Well, for the ISVs, they can actually replace our information with your own information there now and have it have your name and your phone numbers and all of that kind of stuff instead of ours. This is how it might look if you're configuring a proxy. So if you can talk to the internet, but you have to go via a proxy server within your organization, then you just need to configure it there. You can also do all of this stuff on the command line. So LMU -pp and specify the proxy server information. There's an example of replacing the contact information. Again, this stuff only works in Synergy 11, not Rev11 licensing applied to a version 10 or 9 system, because the runtime doesn't have the code to display the updated information. So this is another example of stuff that is Synergy 11 specific. Applying your install code couldn't be simpler. Literally, you place the order with customer services, you get your email, or they tell you, or you can see it in the web portal as well. If you log in, there's the new license, and it'll tell you the install code. And you just literally type it in, or you use LMU -install and the code, and it says install applied, and you get a list of the keys. And literally, they're downloaded and installed like that. So simple. And we have keys installed. So it's a very much easier process. Another nice thing, I mentioned this briefly this morning in the product update. We now support fuzzy version matching. What this basically says is that as long as you have either a current ALM agreement or a current subscription, you can run any version that's released at this point in time. And you don't need specific keys for that version. Back in the day, if you wanted to run version 8, 9, and 10 software, you'd have to have version 8, 9, and 10 license keys installed on the machine. Now, once you've got your version 11 keys, and assuming you have a current ALM or subscription, those keys will be good for any version of the product, even future versions, as long as your subscription is valid. So you can take your version 11 keys and get Synergy version 12, and as long as you're still under ALM or subscription, you're good to go. You will get V12 keys through the normal process, and they'll get upgraded, but you don't necessarily have to have them on there ahead of time. The version 11 keys will allow you to run earlier versions and or later versions. If you have expired ALM products, then nothing's really changed here. If you allow your ALM to expire, then you still have the right to run the current version at the time when the ALM expired, or earlier versions just like you had before, so nothing's really changed there. The one difference is, the first time you get keys through sync, you will see one new key installed on the machine that is literally called ALM, and it has an expiry date. And that simply tells your license server when is your ALM good through. And the only thing it does is it prevents you using versions of the software that are released after that date. Okay, so it does not prevent you running current versions or any earlier versions, but it will, for example, if you allow your ALM to expire and then we release a new version in 3 months' time, you will not be able to run that new version. You will only be able to run stuff up to the point where your ALM expired, which is the license agreement you've already always had. So nothing's changed. It's an extra one thing that can get enforced. Expired subscription products, again, nothing's changed. If a subscription expires, nothing runs, period. So again, nothing's changed there. The licensing web portal, if you haven't looked at it recently, go take a look, because some work's been done on it, and you can already view all of your licenses for all of your customers and drill down into the detail and see all the keys. If you've got an existing license, you can also generate that install code from within the web portal if you need to, if you're doing a reinstall, for example. If you want to, for any reason, you can also hit the Generate Keys button, and it will generate an SKF file and let you download it, and you can install it the old way if you really want to. Okay, so that licensing portal has been enhanced with some of that new functionality. Here's an example of, this is me logged into the Synergex consulting organization, and there's a bunch of our internal licenses. And if you drill into any one of those licenses, you see the detail of the license and the polling information, the products and the number of users and versions and so on. And up the top here, you can see generate keys, that generates an SKF file, or generate install code. Okay. If you generate an install code, all you get is a pop-up saying, okay, we generated an install code, and you'll receive an email with your install code. I think it's also displayed in the, yeah, it's right there. If the install code hasn't been used, it shows up in the portal. Once it's been used, it's a one-time use thing, so once it's been used, it's no good. So if you don't see the install code there, it's because it's already been applied. Okay. And that's an example of generating an SKF file, so you see the information about the licenses and the product keys, and you can download the SKF if you want, if you really want to do it the old way. So here's a few just common scenarios to run through just to show you how things would work. So if you're doing a Synergy version upgrade, so this will be fairly typical. A lot of you guys have got existing systems with version 9 or version 10 on them, and those systems are fully installed and licensed, but there's no Rev11 licensing on those systems. So you've got the current licensing, current versions, and you want to upgrade to version 11. The preferred flow is that you first of all contact customer services and request your upgrade to version 11 for your new keys. At that point, customer services will process that upgrade. They will basically go into the license portal and check the box to say, yes, we're going to enable license polling for this license because they're going to Rev11 licensing. And they will send you an upgrade complete email. So you just install the V11 upgrade on your system at that point, and it tries to poll, and it syncs up through the licensee name, and things just flow down, I believe. Alternate flow, if you do go ahead and say, screw it, I'm just going to put Synergy 11 on this machine before I do anything else, then customer services will receive an email with a mismatch. Okay, and they'll get an email saying, oh, there's a version 11 system out there that's got version 10 licenses, and here's the information. So they will be proactively notified that you've done an upgrade, and they will do one of two things. They may proactively just upgrade your license, or you depends what the timing is. Maybe you then need to call in and say, I just upgraded my system, please upgrade it to V11. Whichever happens first. It's possible they may just do it, and you might just get your keys automatically. But at that point, if you've already done the install before they've done the upgrade, that's one example of when you might want to, once you've got the upgrade complete, go force a sync to grab your keys right now. Existing V9 or V10 system, if you want to add Rev11 licensing to that system, so you're not ready to upgrade to Synergy 11, but you would like the license sync stuff, then basically you simply install the licensing upgrade package onto the system. You would notify Synergex, and again, they would convert your license or prepare your license for polling. They just check the box that says we're going to do license sync from this point on. And again, they will send you an upgrade complete email, and you again can force a sync or just wait till it syncs. If you've just done the install, it'll probably be in every hour mode anyway, so you can force it there and then or just wait for the next poll. If you want to install a new version 9 or 10 system, but you want to immediately put Rev11 licensing onto it, which is another valid scenario, then again, it's best if you pre-order it. So just order your new license. Synergex will create the order in the system, and they will send you the install code as a result of processing that order. And then you just install Synergy, configure Synergy, then apply the licensing upgrade package before you do anything else. So you just do your normal install, then put the license upgrade on there, and then go apply the install code immediately, and the keys should just flow down again. So it's a very similar process, just slightly different depending on what the scenario is. Synergy upgrade, once you've got to Rev11 licensing and you want to do a Synergy upgrade, it's basically ideally pre-request and say, I'm going to do an upgrade. And again, they will process the upgrade and send you an upgrade complete email, and then you just go and install V11, and again, everything should just sync up automatically at that point. Again, there is an alternate flow if you just go ahead, so you've got Rev11 licensing on there already and you just do an upgrade, then we will get a fuzzy matching detected and they will go and upgrade your license, assuming you've got current ALMs or current subscriptions and so on. So again, just a very similar process. ALM processing, nothing really changes with ALM processing. Synergex do what they always did. They process their monthly ALM worksheets, they send them out to you guys, and you either renew or don't. The only difference is that when you renew your ALM this time and you're on Rev11 licensing, you will see that new ALM key in the list that basically just records on your system when your ALM expires. And again, as I said earlier, the only thing that's used for is it's not going to terminate any products that you currently have access to. If your ALM expires, you still get to keep running the products you've always had. All it is we can now enforce the fact that you can't run the next version. That's the only new thing. And it's only within subversions, right? Previously, if you had let's say you got a Synergy 9 license and you let your ALM expire, you couldn't install version 10. Okay, it wouldn't work. You still can't. The difference here, let's say you're on 10.3 and we release a 10.5. Okay, the only new thing is now you won't be able to run 10.5. Okay, because it was released after your ALM expired. Previously, you probably could have installed 10.5, but you couldn't have gone to 11. Okay? But it has not changed your license entitlement. It just allows us to enforce minor 10.1, 10.3, 10.5 access if ALM expires. But it's not changed your entitlement. Subscription processing, really, again, nothing changes. It's still the way it was. It just happens automatically. So your subscription gets renewed, customer services update their records, the next time your system polls, new keys are generated and downloaded, and nothing happens. Okay, you get the new keys, that's it. If your subscription is not renewed, again, nothing really changes. If you have subscription licenses on your system and they have expiry dates and that expiry date is arrived at, then you can't run the products, period. But again, nothing changes. If a subscription license expires, the system will continue polling, trying to get new licenses. So it's assuming, oh, maybe there was a screw up and something's going to pop up in the next few days. But if it doesn't, it only tries for 7 days. And then after that, it will not poll again. So if a subscription is allowed to expire and 7 days is allowed to elapse, you would have to manually intervene to get that system up and running again. It's not just going to magically happen because you make a phone call. Scenario change of entitlement. So this is basically saying you want to add some users or remove some users or add a new product to an existing system. Again, a much simpler process. You're going to contact customer service, make the change to the system, place the new order, whatever it happens to be. The difference is you're not going to be provided with a new SKF file and have to go to the system and install it. The new keys will be generated, downloaded and installed whenever your system polls next. And again, this is just routine. Most of the year, remember, it only happens once every 7 days. So this is a typical scenario of when you might want to just, again, do that LMU-sync to grab those new keys now. Reinstalling systems. So if you need to replace your license server, so you're entirely replacing the system, then as it does today, if you just restore that system onto new hardware or something like that, chances are it's going to put the system back into its 14-day period because the hardware changed. You'll contact customer services and process the reinstall just like you always have. And essentially the difference is rather than sending you new keys for the new system, they'll give you a new install code. You apply that install code, the keys will flow down and life should be good. Another common scenario is if you have a backup of a system that's got licensing on it or a clone of a VM that you use to build new customer systems or new internal servers or whatever, then again, nothing's really changed there. It's just the distribution of the keys is slightly different. Again, you need to contact customer service and saying, we're generating a new system here, essentially place the order for that new system. Again, you will receive an install code for that new license, and you can apply that install code to the system with an LMU command line or using SynConfig if that's what you need to do on Windows. So LMU-R changes the licensee name, makes it a network server, and installs the new install code, which will contact the server, provide all the information, grab the keys, and install them. So it's all based around that 4-digit install code, basically. You get it, you apply it, you're good to go. General questions: what if internet access is not allowed? We do realize that there are a very small number of systems that are just prevented from accessing the internet, period. If that is the case, then we do have a mechanism to suppress polling. The intention is that it will only be used in extraordinary circumstances. So we're going to first of all try and persuade you to allow it to ping the server. But if it absolutely cannot, for whatever reason, or it physically doesn't have internet access, then there is a mechanism by which we can suppress all of the polling stuff, and essentially you're back to where you were before. You need to just get your keys manually and install them on the system through SKF files. How is backup license server affected? Backup license server is not affected at all. It is simply a mirror of the main license server. If your backup license server is activated and therefore is in use right now within your organization, it does not do polling. So the polling to the cloud service is from your primary license server. Your backup server is just a backup in case the primary goes down, but it does not do the polling. So you need to get that primary license server back up and running ASAP. And do kill strings work the same way, the LMU-K to reset all the licensing if it gets screwed up or for whatever reason? Yes, all of that stuff works exactly the same. So if you need to reset the licensing on a machine or for whatever reason, then contact support, they'll ask you why, and you'll get the LMU-K password just like you always did. And LMU-K does wipe out everything from the system. So it's not like the polling config is still there or anything like that. It wipes licensing completely, just like it always did. Additional abilities. Synergex does have the ability to kill product keys. This is not something clearly we would do on a regular basis or without your knowledge. And there are stringent internal procedures that have been put in place that require several people to authorize things to happen, including the president and stuff like that. So it's not something that can happen easily. But there is the ability to send kill messages, essentially, to turn licenses off or remove keys and so on. The primary use case here we foresee is probably our ISVs using it to manage their customer systems. So an ISV could contact Synergex and say, I want to turn this customer system off, please. And we do have the ability to do that, but like I say, it requires a lot of permission to happen at our end based on whatever those criteria are. There is also a new thing that if the Synergy runtime on a Synergy V11 system gets exceeded license counts, so every now and again you run out of licenses, there is a notification generated by that event, but currently it only goes to us, not you. And that's under discussion right now. We think it'd be probably more useful if it went to you, not us, or both. So that's something that's being discussed. And if you feel strongly about that, then I would suggest you provide that feedback to us through your account rep or through the community forums or whatever. Potentially, it's an opportunity for ISVs at least to say, oh, this customer really could do with some more license keys. Let's go sell them some more. Right? But that's, like I say, we get the notifications right now. Worst case scenario, if license sync is not working for any reason, you can still go to the portal, as I've already shown you, and you can still hit that generate keys button, and it will still generate an SKF file, and you can still apply it the way you always have. Okay, so if the worst comes to the worst and the internet goes away, and like I say, this is not a major change to the way licensing works, it's a major change to the way keys get onto systems, and the point is to make your life easier. Okay, thank you for your attention. Time